Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, good morning everyone. The Honorable Mr. Marwito Wihadi MPD as a lecturer in Word Englishes and for everyone who watched this video. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Salsa Nabila. I'm from English Education Department, Kuningan University. In this occasion, I will explain and review journal related to World Englishes. Before that, I will tell you what agenda I will do in this presentation. The first one is to explain the contents of the journal, and the second one is a Q&A session, and then the last one is reading the conclusion. Okay, everyone, let's go to the first session to explain the contents of the journals. Okay everyone, on this occasion I will present a topic entitled Do you speak global? The spread of English and the implication for English language teaching. This research was conducted by Tonje M. Keiney from the University of Calgary. This research addressed how the spread of English as an international language affects English language teaching, or ELT. The presentation will explore the evolution of word Englishes and its impact on approaches to English language teaching in different parts of the world. Okay, for the background in this research is the global spread of English has made it the most dominant international language with 3 to 4 times more non-native speakers than native speakers. This phenomenon has given rise to the concept of word Englishes, English as a lingua franca or ELF, and English as an international language or EIL, indicating that English has developed into a plural language used to various communication functions across cultures. This phenomenon gave rise to the concept of world Englishes, which is the diversity of varieties of English in different regions. English as a lingua franca or ELF, which show its role as a language of interactional context, and English as an international language or EIL, which reflects the function of English as a global communication tool. This development confirms that English has become a plural and a flexible language, reflecting not only the culture of a native speaker, but also the needs of cross-cultural communication around the world. Thus, it is important to understand how this change impact on English language teaching, or ELT. With more non-native speaker, ELT must adjust to this reality, including accommodating the diversity of English spoken globally and adapting teaching method to the needs of international communication. Okay, and the next slide is the purpose of study. The purpose of this research is to analyze how the global spread of English has affected the way the language and its teaching are perceived, and to explore the change needed in English language teaching or ELT practice with the increasing use of English as an important as an international language and a cross-cultural communication tool. This research aims to identify strategies for ELT to adapt the needs of non-native speakers around the world. These approaches include integrating world Englishes in teaching materials, prioritizing communicative competence of native norms, and creating teaching practices that are more sensitive to local culture context. Okay, so this study also aims to explore how ELT can adapt to the needs of non-native speakers who now dominate the number of English language users. In this context, English is no longer considered as to solve poverty of native speakers, but rather as a flexible and diverse cross-cultural communication tools, as reflected in the concept of English as a lingua franca or ELF and English as an international language or EIL. And the main focus of this research is to encourage a paradigm shift in ELT from an approach that only prioritize native speaker standard to one that is more inclusive and sensitive to local context. By doing so, ELT can empower non-native speakers to use English according to their needs in international interaction without having to follow the rigid standard of native varieties such as British or American English. Okay, for the next slide is method. This research used a qualitative methodology as its main focus in an in-depth exploration the phenomenon of the spread of English and its impact on English language teaching or ELT. This methodology allows for an interpretive analysis of concepts such as World Englishes and English as a lingua franca or ELF and their adaptation in a global learning context with a case study at Tokyo University. This research explored how change in ELT practice are implemented according to the needs of non-native speakers, providing a more contextualized understanding and focusing on a meaning rather than numbers or statistics. Okay, this research used a qualitative approach to explore in depth the phenomenon of the spread of English and its impact on English language teaching or ELT. One important part of this research is a case study at Tokyo University in Japan, which provides a concrete picture of how ELT practice can be changed to reflect a diversity and a cross-cultural communication needs. For example, the program at Tokyo University emphasized developing student communicative competence in local varieties in English rather than simply imitating standard British or American English. This case study also shows how the use of teaching materials that reflect various word English varieties and exposure to speakers from different circles like inner outer and expanding circles can enhance student understanding of the plurality of English. It's quoted in Matsuda 2003. Okay, for the next slide is findings 1. In findings 1, the spread of English according to Katru, 1996. The first one is a regional or British Isles. In the initial phases, the spread of English took place in the British Isles region, encompassing England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland during the 16th and 17th centuries. During this period, English developed into several unique regional dialects, reflecting local culture and social influence. This dispersal formed the basis for the internal diversity of English that later developed further in Katru 1996. And the second one is a diaspora or North American and Australia. It means English diaspora. The next basis saw the spread of English through massive migration to North America, Australia, and New Zealand. This spread created new varieties of English such as American English and Australian English, which became the distinctive accents of native speakers in those regions. This process confirmed that migration is one of the main factors shaping the diversity of modern English in Katru 1996. And the next is colonial spread in Asia and Africa. In the colonial phase, English was introduced to the Asian and African regions, creating new communities that use English as a lingua franca for administration, education, and cross-cultural communication. For example, in India, English became the main administrative language during British colonial rule and remains an important language in education and law today. In Katru 1996, Six, this species also created unique local varieties of English, such as Indian English or Nigerian English, as a result of interaction with a local language. Next, in finding ones is the dominance of inner circle norms in teaching practices. Until now, inner circle norms, standard organizing for native speaker countries such as the United Kingdom and the United States, still dominate in English language teaching. This can be seen from ELT textbook that often only feature British English or American English accent models, while varieties of English from other and expanding circles countries such as Indian English or Singapore English are rarely recognized or used. This dominance suggests the need for a paradigm shift in ELT to reflect a more global and inclusive diversity. Okay, and the next one is finding two. In a finding two is challenges of the spread of English. The first one is a sociolinguistic implication of world Englishes and English as a lingua franca. One of the main challenges of the spread of English is the sociolinguistic implication presented by the concept of world Englishes. And English as a lingua franca or ELF, word Englishes and ELF reflect the diversity of forms of English that develop outside the native speaker's norm. For example, speakers in India or Nigeria use English that has been adapted to their local culture and needs. However, these varieties are often considered non-standard because they do not conform to inner circle norms such as British or American English. This finding highlights the need for recognizing more pluralistic forms of English to support the reality of its use globally. And the second one in findings two is resistant to native speakers norms and assumptions in ELT. The practice of English language teaching or ELT is still dominated by native speaker norms, which become the main standard in learning. This can be seen from international English exams such as TOEFL or IELTS, as we know, which assess student abilities based on British or American English grammar and accents. But in fact, for a non-native speaker, what is more important is communicative competence in various cross-cultural contexts. Not just following the inner circle standard, resistance to this approach is increasingly necessary to that ELT can be more relevant to the needs of students outside the inner circles. Okay, and the last in findings two is sacrificing the 5 causes for paradigm change. Katru, 1996, proposes the need to sacrifice 5 sacred cows in ELT to create paradigm shift. The following is an explanation of its sacred cow. But before I explain, the term cow is used by Bright Katru 1996 as a metaphor to describe concepts that are considered sacred in English language teaching or ELT in many cultures, including India. The cow is considered a sacred symbol that should not be contested. By using this term, Katru wants to highlight that some assumptions in ELT are considered sacred and should not be debated, despite the fact that these concepts are no longer relevant in the context of the global spread of English. Everyone, the use of this metaphor is also intended to arouse the critical thinking of ELT professionals to dare to question the tradition that have long been taken for granted. 5 sacred cows cover 5 aspects that have dominated the ELT practice so far, and is an explanation of each sacred cow. The first one is uh, acquisitional cow, the focus on a native-like ability in a relevant. The learning process should prioritize communicative competence rather than simply achieving native proficiency. And the second one is a theoretical cow. The definition of native speaker needs to be overhauled as it is no longer relevant in the context of global English user. All speakers, both native and non-native, have equal rights to use English. And the next is pedagogical cow. Teaching materials and method should reflect the local context. ELT should not just follow the norms of the inner circle, but should be more sensitive to the local needs of students. And for the social-linguistic cow is recognition of local linguistic and a culture variation is essential. World English should be seen as an assess, not a deviation from the standard. And ideological cow ELT approaches should resist the imperial domination of English instead of restoring inner circles norms. ELT should empower students to use English according to their needs and context. For example, in this finding at Tokyo University in Japan, the curriculum designed to prioritize student communicative competence by exposing them to various varieties of word Englishes. This helps students accept and understand the diversity of English, making them more confident in using the language in a various international contexts. Okay, next slide is discussion. Okay, the first one is prioritize communicative competence over native like accuracy. English language teaching should prioritize effective communicative skills over attempts to mimic the grammar or accent of native speaker. For example, at Tokyo University, Japan, the teaching focus is on building student confidence to speak English in international situation, even when interacting with speakers from different countries who have different accents and speaking styles. This approach allows students to use English in a relevant and contextualized way without being bound to inner circle standards that are often not realistic or relevant to them. And for the second one is recognize and teach pluralistic varieties of English. English teaching should also recognize the pluralistic varieties of the language, such as India English, Singlish, or Nigerian English, as part of the World Englishes. For example, Tokyo University has integrated various World Englishes accents in their teaching materials so that students understand that English belongs to the global, not just native speakers. This helps students appreciate the culture and linguistic diversity of English and improves their skills in adapting to various international communicating situations. And for the third is align teaching materials and method with a sociocultural context. Teaching materials and method should reflect the sociocultural context of students and ensure that learning is relevant to their needs. At Tokyo University, teaching materials are designed to reflect the realities of English use in developing countries and the ASEAN region. Not just situation in the UK or America. For example, learning materials focus on business communication between ASEAN countries so that students can prepare themselves for situations they are likely to encounter. This approach emphasizes that English teaching cannot be separated from the social and cultural realities of students, thus increasing the effectiveness of learning. Okay, the next slide is discussion 2. First one is a curriculum shift to emphasize world Englishes. Tokyo University in Japan has made a significant change in its English teaching curriculum by emphasizing the concept of world Englishes. This means that students are taught that English does not only belong to countries with native speakers such as the United Kingdom and the United States, but is also actively spoken in countries such as India, Nigeria, and Singapore. By recognizing this variation, student understanding that English is a global language that reflects culture and linguistic diversity, so they are better prepared to communicate in a real international context. And the second one is a textbook reflecting diverse English varieties. Teaching materials at Chukyo are designed to reflect the diversity of English varieties. Textbook no longer only features life situation in native-speaking countries such as Britain or American, but include international context with accents and vocabulary from various world Englishes. For example, text might depict a business conversation between speaker from India and Japan or academic discussion involving African accents. This help us understand that English has many legitimate and relevant ways to use around the world. And the last in discussion too is evaluation based on communicative competence, not native norms. At Chukyo University, student assessment focuses on their communicative competence, not on the ability to mimic a native speaker, accent, or grammar. Students are assessed on their ability to convey ideas clearly and effectively, regardless of the accent or grammatical structure they use. This approach gives students the confidence to speak English without the fear of making mistakes. And that are considered not in line with native norms. It reflects the understanding that communication skills are more important than linguistic perfection, especially in a global context. Okay, I think enough for the explanation of related journal to world Englishes, and the next session is Q&A session. There are two types of question. Is the first is short answer, and the second one is true or false. True or false questions. For short answer, there are three questions, and for the true or false, there are three also. And for the answer key, I will explain why the answer is that. And for the first, before I explain about that, I will read the question first. For the short answer, first, what influenced the global spread of the English language? And the second one is, what is meant by world Englishes? And the third is, why does ELT need to adapt to world Englishes? Okay? And for true or false question, the first one is English spoken around the world has one common standard. And the second one is Chukyo University teaches English based only on the accents and grammar of native speakers. And third is ELT should recognize the plurality of English spoken by non-native speakers. Okay, and here it is, the answer key. And I will repeat the question. For the first questions is, what influenced the global spread of the English language? And the answer is colonization and economics. Why? Because the global spread of English was influenced by two main factors. First is colonization, and the second one is economics. During the colonial period, countries like Britain introduced English to the territories they colonized, including Asia, Africa, and parts of the Americas. This process made English lingua franca in administration, education, and commerce. So, global economy dominated by English-speaking countries such as the United States and the United Kingdom also contributed to the spread of English as the primary language of international business and science. Uh, Gradle 1997 and Kachur 1996 explained that strong economics factors coupled with a political and cultural influence help makes English a language spoken around the world. And the second question is what is meant by world Englishes? The answer is varieties of English. World Englishes refers to different varieties of English spoken around the world, which evolve according to the cultural and social context of each region. English does not have just one standardized form, but varies depending on the country and community of use. Cutler's 1996 states that through context with a various local language, English has adapted and given birth to many legitimate varieties such as Indian English, Singapore English, and Nigerian English. These varieties show that English is now shared by many people around the world, not only by native speaker. Thus, word English is recognized the plurality and diversity in a global English usage. For the third question is why do ELTs needs to adapt to world Englishes? The answer is to accommodate diversity. Why? English language teaching or ELT needs to adapt to world Englishes to accommodate the diversity of English spoken by non-native speakers around the world. With more and more non-native speakers using English language teaching should reflect this reality and not just focus on native speaker standards. In Jenskins 2006 and McKay 2003 emphasized that ELT should recognize that communicative competence is more important than imitating native speakers' accents or grammar. ELT programs that integrate the different varieties of world Englishes will give students the confidence to speak English according to their needs in international situations without being hampered by norms limited to one particular accent or models. Okay, for the fourth questions is type of true or false question. The first one is English spoken around the world has one common standard, and the answer is false because English has various varieties depending on the culture and social context of its use. This statement is false because as English does not have one uniform standard around the world. World Englishes show that English has many variations depending on the culture, social context, and geographical location of its user. As Kachru 1996 explains, English developed according to the interactions with a local language and culture in different countries. Therefore, although English has a common root, it has many legitimate forms, and all such forms are of value in international communication. And the fifth question is Chukya University teach English only based on the accents and grammar of native speaker? The answer is false because Chukya University teach various varieties of world Englishes and grades based on communicative competence. This statement is false because at Chukya University, the English teaching curriculum does not only focus on native speaker accent and grammar but also integrates various varieties of world Englishes. The university assists students based on their communicative competence, not on conformity to native accent or grammars. This means that students are assessed on their ability to convey ideas clearly and effectively, even though they may use different accents or language structure. This approach is more in line with the reality of global communication, with prioritize understanding and clarity over conformity to native speaker norms. Okay, and the last question is ELT should recognize the plurality of English used by non-native speaker, and the answer is true. ELT should reflect the diversity of English spoken around the world, not just the standard of native speaker. This statement is true because English language teaching or ELT should reflect the diversity of English spoken by non-native speakers around the world. With the growing number of non-native speakers, ELT should expand its understanding of English beyond the native speaker standard. For example, Tokyo University in Japan integrates various varieties of Englishes in its curriculum and assists students based on communicative competence, not on accent or grammatical perfection according to native standard. McKay 2003 and Jenkins 2006 emphasize that English language teaching should focus on effective communication skills which are more relevant to the use of English in a global context. Okay, enough for Q&A session. And the last is I will read a conclusion and a suggestion for this journal. For the conclusion is English language teaching or ELT must adapt to reflect the plurality and international nature of the English language. With the growing number of non-native speakers around the world, it is important for teachers to challenge old assumptions about English that only paper the native speakers know. This approach will empower students to use English more flexibly and according to a wider global context. And a suggestion for this journal is to support this change. It is just suggested that teaching practices focusing on world Englishes uh, be implemented globally. This includes the design of teaching materials that are more sensitive to local and diverse cultures. In addition, ELT professionals need to be educated on a pluralistic approaches to teaching different varieties of English so that they can better understand and respond to the needs of students across different social and cultural contexts. Okay, this is the presentation of journals related to world Englishes. I apologize if there are word errors either in the presentation or mistake in presenting definition or example, or there are arguments that are wrong. I think those who have watched and want to learn together. Have a great day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.